Fran Solomita, where do I begin? Well-traveled in the entertainment space, a standout in stand-up comedy, and has parlayed that now as an executive with NBC, where he is vice president content at NBC Sports Next and Fandango at NBC Sports Next, doing incredible work with different creatives in the golf space and beyond. And this is his story, unfiltered, uncut, where we go beyond the boundaries of work to learn about a man who was one of 10 kids and how that lack of validation as a child fueled the road that his life took. Yeah, we're going to go in depth here from a place of empathy and compassion. I'm Bryan Fenley, a broadcaster working with different outlets, calling different sports. This is the On to Something podcast. And before we get started with Fran, don't forget to subscribe. Here it is, my chat with Fran. We have the comedic stylings of one Fran Solomita with us. And Fran, thank you for being a part of this. I know I've had a lot of your colleagues on, and this is going to be a blast to be able to share your story.
No, thanks for having me, man.
The idea of you and your career, you're known for a lot of things, including your sideburns. How has that become such a staple of where you've made it and where you're going in this industry?
You know, if I showed you some pictures of my dad's mutton chops, man, they were very impressive. So I'm just trying to keep it alive. You know what I'm saying? You got to just keep that old school style, Dean Martin kind of thing.
What about your childhood, being one of 10 kids? To this day, do you keep alive?
Oh, wow. That's it's a lot. You grow up in a family that big, you just got to figure out how to make your statement, how to make your presence known. I used to say it was like being like at a press conference, and the guys behind the mic, whoever it is, and you're just one of the people going, and they're like not picking on you. So it's like, you just got to figure out a way to stand out. But it was really interesting. I'm 8 of 10 kids. I don't know them all personally, but I hear from each other very much. But it's like, you just got to figure out a way, and so I became a diplomat at a very young age. I figured out a way to get along with everybody, and they're all very different people. So it kind of was a good training ground for life at an early age.
At that early age, and even to this day, how hard was it to get that valuable validation that humans crave when you are living in a place where there are so many people around you? How much of that did you not get, and how much of that in not getting it fueled what you did in the comedy space and being in front of the camera and your creativity in entertainment?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, you don't, if you live on the inside of a clown car, you don't want to know what it looks like. You think everybody lives that way till you leave the clown car and you say, wait a minute, everybody doesn't live as crazy as me? Because it wasn't just a big family, it was a crazy fun house, like a lot of looseness going on, as far as behavior and stuff going on in the house. So I think because I was so young in the order, my parents were pretty tired, and so my older siblings kind of raised us and tried to anyway. But it was just like there was always something going on, whether it was music or big family, big drama. That's what they say. So people listening to music, people had friends over, and it was just kind of a constant turn of the chaos. And so you just kind of got used to it. You pick your poison of the day. Do I want to keep my head low? Do I want to get involved in stuff? Do I want to go play hockey in the driveway? Do I want to push around with my brother and figure out what's going on if we were going to have a wrestling match? It was like things like that. You just had to kind of just find yourself, and I think it really did help me, and continues to. You're either making jokes or you're making trouble, and I kind of did a little of both. I definitely had my issues as far as behavior. I remember I got a report card or one of those comment slips from my 5th grade music teacher that said, Francis does absolutely nothing in my class except fool around. And I'm like, okay, I think that's both really good and really bad. At least I know my track. So kind of informed the comedy.
How does the chaos of the childhood fuel the comedy?
Well, I mean, there's a million stories, you know. I used to say, you know, my dad was Catholic, no birth control, no control whatsoever. You know, he never hit any one of us specifically. He would just sort of swing his belt around his head, eventually hitting one of us because we all deserved it. So, you know, I just think in general, you know, you're constantly having to kind of fight for that place at the table, right? It was a lot of personalities, and they were strong, and there was no social media. There was not a lot of distractions besides just the people around you. You had a TV, right? But it wasn't like you could each be on a, you know, an iPad watching different movies. You all kind of had to figure out, oh, are we going to watch the same thing tonight? Or is one person going to get to choose? How's that going to work? Twilight Zone or the Red Sox game? What's it going to be? You know, so diplomatic skills came in handy really quickly.
What did getting validation in those diplomatic skills as you would then, as you got older, transition into on camera stand up and comedy clubs and really making a name for yourself? I was actually on YouTube and saw this really cool, I guess you would call it episode or feature of you where you're on CBS and you're doing all these things, you're telling your life story. But being out in front of people as you got older, how did that in a way help you self-actualize who you really were in getting the reaction and the love and the cheers that you had not gotten perhaps as much as a kid? But here you put yourself out there, and what did that do for you in, I guess, in your life's journey?
Well, it's exhilarating. It's a crazy thing to do, stand-up comedy. It's nuts. And I started doing it at 18. First, I was in a team with my brother. We worked on the streets, literally went on the streets of Boston, Cambridge, Massachusetts, and did stuff on the streets. Then we got into the clubs because the clubs started opening. I mean, it's incredibly insane to go up on stage or out on the street in front of an audience of people that you don't know and to forcibly try to make them laugh. And out on the streets was double as hard because, you know, they're walking by and there's all this disturbance. And so just that challenge was invigorating. It was very cool because it made me more nervous than I could possibly even describe. But when we succeeded at it, it was so gratifying because you're literally making a connection through humor. And humor is subjective, so it's even more risky, right? So you don't know necessarily what the audience is going to go for. And I think in the early stages, there was less confidence in that sort of thing. Of course, with experience comes more confidence, and then you sort of know how to sort of play them. But, you know, it did incredible things for me. I mean, I didn't even realize it till I got out of it, how much it did for me, if you want to know the truth. Because I never had a traditional education. I have a high school, you know, degree, and that's about it. I was doing stand-up when I was a senior in high school. So I was doing theater and things like that. But comedy for me is about learning how to connect and relate to any gathering of people. And through that, you know, you're vulnerable, you're kind of aggressive. It's that combination. You're creative, you're trying all these things at the same time, even though you've prepared. Once you're up there in the heat of it, it's kind of this electric moment, and then things happen, and that's kind of fun too, because a lot of spontaneity brings sometimes the best moments.
How did you get to become so fearless?
There's a great line. My favorite line from any Bruce Springsteen song is, "I can't tell my courage from my desperation."
Wow.
Yeah.
So for
So,
you, what does that mean?
I mean, I think because of the way I think even before you come out, you're sort of built a certain way, you're wired a certain way. So it's hard to know whether it was because of the way I was raised, or because the house I was raised in, or because of who I hung out with when I was younger, if that made me as sort of bold. I wouldn't say courageous. I think I'm bold. You know, I kind of never said no to stuff. And sometimes you should say no to stuff. So there were some things I said yes to that maybe I shouldn't have to. But as far as the performance side, I think you just got to be able to, you know, fight past the fear, you know, because there's so much on the other side of it that is so worthwhile. And that can go for, you know, in the corporate world, you know, in the sports world, you know, the aspirational all the new stuff that's coming out now about, just that sort of knowing yourself, right? Knowing what your strengths are, I think is important. And I think, we did this thing recently at work called Strength Finders. And, it's about leaning into your strengths as opposed to fretting over your weaknesses. And it was really cool. And it made me think about how I sort of have lived my life. I try not to think about the things I can't do. And I just say, well, how can I do this? Or how can we do this if I'm in a team or a group? So I think it's just pushing through, saying, that really scares the hell out of me, but damn it, I'm going to try it just because, because it's really nice to come out the other side.
That it is. And with everything that you've done in the comedy space, and something that you've said before, Fran, is how misery breeds comedy, and it's a way to heal through the challenges that life presents itself, in the sense of it being cathartic to be able to laugh at something. What about your life is most serious, where when you are on stage or have been on stage and you've been able to laugh at yourself, and that had to have felt validating because to get that out? But what about your life is almost too serious to be talked about outwardly in the form of comedy, that is completely a divergent path from what you've done in the comedy space?
Yeah, that's a tricky question. I really don't know. I mean, it's, I think there's obviously at the core of a lot of creative people, certainly performers, is, self-worth issues, right? That happens, and that's sort of a tough road to go down. But I think, if you can make light of things, and try to find the funny or try to find the relatability, it's valuable, right? Um, I used to do this one joke when I was early in my, not early, but sort of when I was doing stand-up, I was talking about how big my family was and saying, oh, my mother could never accept it when one of her kids was doing better than the other. So I was a comedian, I was an actor. I said, Mom, I got a role in a movie. And she distributed the credit. She goes, oh, your brother Michael went to the movies today. Like, not the same thing, Mom. Not the same thing, So I think that's a way to kind of, you draw attention to the fact, okay, this is an issue that I had as a kid, and this is an issue that you have in a big family, but now I'm going to make a joke about it because it's better than being upset about it, right? Of course, you are upset about it at the core as a kid, but when you get past that, you kind of go, okay, how can I make that funny? So I think that's sort of a good example of that.
When you can laugh at those unresolved things in your life from your past, how does that make life more livable for you to this day in what you're doing now?
It's healthy, and again, really going there with stuff is really brave too, and it's kind of funny because I've been I've been doing a few sets recently, like after literally almost 15 years of not doing it at all. Like I haven't done it professionally in about 20 years, but I just did a few sets and I told my wife, I said, I'm just gonna, whatever I do, it's gonna be me now. It's not gonna be any of the old stuff. So we literally put together a whole new act about, how it is now in my life and what it's like. And it's, like I said, it's just, it's an ongoing conversation. It can be with yourself, it can be with the audience, right? But I didn't want to be, I wanted to do jokes about what I look like now, what I am now. One of the things I'm doing on stage is I say, what I do know is that the older you get, the younger old seems. Like now when someone I know dies, I'm like, what? Jack died? He just turned 89. What the hell happened? Are you kidding me? Was it like a skydiving accident? An air conditioner fall on his head? 89. God, so young, so much to live for. I just make a bit about that, right? Because it's, it's a good observation about the fact that there's less road in front of me than there is behind me now, right? So I need to, confront it.
How much time in front of the mirror do you spend?
Not much. I don't need to see it. That's that. Since you set that up, I'll say, well, now when I look in the mirror, I see my father, and I wish he'd find his own place because it's only a small house. Okay, so,
How much of your self-talk is your father talking?
Definitely comes in. It comes in sometimes. He was a mild guy. I'm definitely a much more aggressive person as far as how I attack things and how I attack life. But he was a very kind, mild man. He was a dignified guy. He worked hard. He had 10 kids, so you have to work hard. But I think there's a little of that in there. There's a little of that.
The differences in your personality, as you're just laying that out there, is that part of the rebellious side of you and wanting to be different from him? How do you characterize your differences opposed to not taking on his personality as a whole?
Well, I mean, I don't think anybody takes on anybody's personality as a whole simply because you're just your own sort of being, right? I really never thought about it much. I just was, right? I think there were things that, I saw in him that were really amazing and I was, super learned a lot from and we're grateful for. And then there's things that I just, you know, whatever, people are people, and sometimes you see things you go, I don't know if I would do that in that situation, but he had a lot on his plate. And I try to keep that in mind. I try to have, grace that, and keep myself humble that way. And that was something he had too. He was a very humble guy. And uh, it was just interesting, because there were so many men. I have 6 brothers too. So it was a lot of guys in the house. So it's just a lot of strong personalities.
When you were growing up, what did your dad tell you that he was most amazed in about you? You've talked about what made him amazing, returning the favor and what he saw in you and how he would communicate that to you.
Work ethic. I mean, I was just a fighter from the beginning. As soon as I got out of school, I worked hard. I didn't work hard in school once I got out of school. So, as soon as I got into the, comedy stuff and the acting stuff, I just grinded. As soon as I got, excuse me, good at stuff, I just started firing away and I started to, just put everything I had into it. I did not let up. And that's something that he recognized and thought, damn, good for you, so that was cool.
You mentioned something earlier about desperation and courage and the fine line that those two can
Mhm.
have. The switch that you felt from high school and then totally turning it on and fooling around in a way of which you're getting the comedy going, but you're serious. And like you said, you've really devoted yourself, indulged yourself into the hard work. How did you have this 180 change in your life? And what made that happen for you, that wake up call?
You just get energized. I mean, it happened so organically. I came alive. Like I literally came alive. It was like a point in my life where I was just feeling like I needed something to kind of drive. Like you can't succeed if you're not sure of what you're trying to succeed at. And I think until that point, when I got into comedy, I didn't know what I was trying to do really. And then when we got into that, both first with my brother and then on my own, I just was like, I was a mercenary. I just didn't stop. I mean, in Boston and New York back in the day, I mean, I was doing between 4 and 7 sets a night sometimes because there were so many clubs and there was so much going on. And I was getting pretty good at it. So I could work all the different rooms. And then when I moved to New York, it was the same thing. It was just this on it was wonderful because if you're just sort of an actor and that's your pursuit, just to be a theater major or an actor, you're depending on other things that are beyond your control to give you self-satisfaction, self-worth, self-value, all that stuff. And I didn't need any of that. I was doing it at night, so I got that response, immediate response,
Yes.
just show after show, good or bad, how you do. That's the best thing about stand-up. You just know. And so that was really the driving force. It was I just fed off of it. Every other part of my life was just energized because of it.
And so much of how well you did was based upon how well you read the room when you're having yourself on stage and you know your audience. That the science behind or the art behind reading the room, not just in the space of where you've been, where you are in, say, stand-up comedy, but what you're doing now at NBC and as a creative and in other areas of your life? How has reading the room been such a key instrument to the success that you've had in your ability to really fine-tune that muscle?
It's everything. It's being intuitive. It's knowing personalities, whether they're personalities that are your leaders or your boss or people that you are managing. It's literally all about that. It is understanding that everyone's different and that everybody needs to be heard. Everybody needs to be seen, even the people who are sometimes, like I said, can be complicated to work with, and you just kind of walk into a room and you can tell immediately who's who much quicker than people that haven't done stand up. Like it was almost like the printout in like Mission Impossible when it prints out who the person is, and you see exactly, what agency they work for. And, it's like I can do that really quickly in a room. I can read 30 people around a table and go, okay, I know who I have to connect with here and I know what I need to do. So it's this, I guess you call it EQ now, emotional intelligence, because I certainly don't have conventional intelligence. Nothing to brag about there, but the definitely feel like I can figure out almost any human and get to them and connect with them. And that's been super valuable.
What have you figured out about me and you getting to read me?
You're a guy who, let's start with you're a guy. I got that.
Yes.
I can see that. No, you're a guy that is incredibly earnest and smart and has a career that is, I think, going to just get bigger and bigger. And I could tell the moment I talked to you the first time. Someone who's curious, and that's really cool, and someone that's digging a little deeper, right, than most. And also someone that's still feeling his way around the world too. I'm getting that from you too. I'm like a psychic, but I'm usually wrong. I'm that kind of psychic. I wouldn't make a lot of money at this job as a psychic, but I do think that there's a goodness there too, right? So there's certain ways you can do that, and then okay, that person, like you, for instance, I wouldn't see you as someone that I have to go, oh boy, this one's going to be tough. I go, okay, he's a guy that's kind of like me. He wants to get along with folks. The intention is right there, right? So that's my dime store analysis of you right there.
And you say you're not a psychic. I mean, you're a psychic right there in the
Yeah,
way you've explained that. What about you as an empath?
probably too much. Probably
And
too much one. Yeah.
why do you think that is, and where do you think that came from?
Well, again, it goes back to self-worth. You want to be a people pleaser sometimes. You kind of do that just to get along with everybody. I think being from a big family, that happens because you really are trying to get along with a lot of different people at all times. So you kind of are able to sort of change you're adjusting a little bit to each person. I always said that, especially creative people, I think are like instruments. We're like the land of misfit toys, right? So one person might be a cello, they're playing the cello. One person might be the drums. They're a little louder, they're a little more ruckus. And my job as a conductor and in leadership is just sort of saying, okay, this needs a lot from me. Okay. This one needs a lot of, response. They need a lot of back and forth. They need a lot of guidance. This person over here is playing the violin beautifully. I'm just going to let them do what they do. And I'm going to keep them within the guardrails of whatever we're doing. But for the most part, it's like that kind of thing. It's really just intuitive, right? And I also think, especially at this stage in my career, you want to get the best out of people, but you also want to, be able to see their best too, as who they are. And I think connecting and showing that empathy and, even love, just to be able to be a good person is important. And that's not taught, right? That's just something that's there.
What is there behind you is a boxing glove. Who did you knock out?
Oh yeah, that's right. Oh, that's a good story. So, um, one of the best, if not the best career day of my entire life. I was I was working with Michael J. Fox when I first got into on-air promo about 20 years ago when he was on Spin City. And he had just come out about his Parkinson's. He had just sort of made it public a year or two prior to that. And I had done some shoots with him. So he invited me to come over to out to Phoenix with a team out there and direct these PSAs for Parkinson's research for his foundation. So I was like, of course, I'll fly out there. Just get me out there. No, don't pay me. I'll just hang out and we'll do it. Then about a week before the shoot, I get a call from his manager, and she goes, "Listen, we got some new news. The good news is we're going to do this in Phoenix, and we're still directing it. But then the new news is Muhammad Ali is going to be there too. So you're going to direct Muhammad Ali and Michael in these spots together." So I literally spent the day with the champ, the GOAT, the original GOAT. And it was dreamlike. It was dreamlike because as a kid, we used to listen to his fights on the radio when they would do the round by round, coverage. And it was magical. He was incredibly nice. He was still lucid. He was still in pretty good, condition. But it was literally like being in a movie that I was watching myself in. It was crazy. And I spent 6-7 hours with him and Michael just working on these little spots together. And we had to take breaks because sometimes they had some issues with their, tremors and so forth. But it was the most magical day of my life. And it happened because, I was working well with Michael and his show, Michael J. Fox and his show, and they just really thought that, hey, Fran's pretty good for this job. Let's see if he can come over and do it. And I had already left ABC. I was now at NBC, but they called me and had me do it. So it was pretty neat.
What did Ali say to you?
He was amazing. So he's him and Michael are walking through the courtyard of the hotel where we're shooting it, and it's 7 a.m. So it's bright, sunny Arizona sun, very warm, and the two of them are about 30 yards away walking toward the set. Ali is 6'4", wearing all black. Michael's 5'2", wearing all black. And the two of them are just walking together, and they're both sort of got their things going on with their bodies. And it was just the most surreal, like weird ballet I was watching between a comedy hero and a sports hero. And Michael walks by me. They finally get to the door, and Michael walks by me and says some wise ass thing, and he just kind of keeps on walking. And then Ali's standing there, and his handler, his woman who was working with him, his handler says, Muhammad, this is Fran. He's going to be directing. And Muhammad just looks at me and he goes, and he just brings his fists up. He goes like this, and he starts coming at me. And I was laughing and frightened and just so freaking out at the time. I didn't know what to do. So I kind of put my hands up, and then he did the coolest thing ever. He just reached out and he hugged me. Oh. He brought me in for the biggest bear hug ever. And I'm just like, man, do I feel safe right now. I am being hugged by the champion of the world. So he was awesome. He was really nice to everybody. He was really cool with me. And like I said, it was literally like a day where I couldn't believe I was there. And I have behind the scenes footage from that from literally 20 years ago. And I look at it and I still just can't believe it. It was literally the greatest work day of my life.
How is your memory? How is your memory so strong? The way you are laying out these anecdotes, it's as if they happened yesterday. That's a skill that not everybody has.
Well, that's literally the greatest work moment of my life. There's not even a career moment, that could top that. I have some pretty darn good ones too. Some other sort of bigger name folks, but he, to me, just as a kid growing up, was everything. And everything he stood for, and the kind of person he was, and just the love and humor. He was a terribly funny guy, when I was a kid, and all the rhymes he would do. And I just loved him. We loved him. And so I think, certain stories just sort of snap you back into that, moment by moment, retelling. And so that's just one of the many that I can probably pop back into and just kind of go through and tell you it. And I've written about it a little bit too. So maybe that has something to do with it.
What kind of writer are you?
Pretty direct. There's not much, flower in it. I just write, I'm really working on a lot of stories from my upbringing and from my professional life. And it's really just tell it like it is. It's not too poetic, but it's real. And I try to make it funny, even when it's, a serious subject. Um, I think writing is a muscle. I think writing is the hardest part of any aspect of the creative process in movie making, film, movie making, TV shows, anything. I think the writers are the ones who do all the grunt work. I think writing's so hard. And I got some friends who are really good writers. I'm a pretty good one. I think if I did it more, I'd be a great one, but I'm not. I just, life is, I got a lot going on. So, it's hard to be putting in all that time, but I definitely want to write something big someday. And I'm working on some stuff. So we'll see. It's just fun to do.
Your writing is at such a high level. So when I hear you say, "Oh, I've got to make it, or I can make it greater," from what you do now to what is, in your words, greater, what
Mhm.
does that look like? Because I'm not seeing a whole lot of disparity between those
Yeah.
two levels.
You know what it is? It's it's probably another not great thing that I have, and that is the need to be perfect at stuff. And nobody's perfect, and I'm certainly far from it. But creatively, I know I have moments, I have these little bursts, right? But the reason why I think writing and the best writers are where they are, um, because they don't treat it like um something that's light. They go so far and then they pull it back, but they have to go far in order to get to that perfect place, right? Um, but I think there's a lot. I think there's a lot there. I just think that I would want it to be a lot more um, my own voice, right? Because I think we're all looking for the voice. Everybody talks about they have a voice. This person has a voice. This writing has a voice. That's probably what I'm thinking about. But I also think there is that insecurity of like, hey, I want this to be perfect. It's got to be just right, but nothing's just right. So I got to let that go. So that's on my to-do list. Let that go, you know?
And when you write about that, what would you say? That there's a harshness and there's a perfectionism that is is important to how much success you've had, but at the same time, that realization is, and we all know it, easier said than done,
Yeah.
where nobody's perfect.
You just gotta, again, throw caution to the wind and just do it. Just keep doing it, and don't be afraid to tear it up and throw it out and start over again. Rewrite. Show it to people who are going to be hard on you and truthful. People who are supportive, not people who are going to, who don't want you to do well. It's got to be a circle of trust you're sharing it with if you're going to. Um, but yeah, just do it. And then put it away. Then go, I did it. That's done. Right? I think a lot of people, including myself, you always want to sort of revise, and make things, why didn't I do that? Or you have a second thought. Like I remember when I would do stand up, you'd go on stage and you do 40 minutes and just kill. You do great. And I'd walk off stage and I remember the two jokes that didn't do as well as I had wanted. I didn't think about all the good moments. I would just kick my own ass and go, why didn't I? Oh gosh, I can't believe I did it that way. So it's just, I don't know.
Why do you think the brain latches onto those things? Because it's very synonymous with all humans in a way. It's almost like we're predestined to think that way, where it's ingrained. Why do we at times hang on to the tiny finite moments of imperfection when there's so much great that we've already achieved?
I couldn't tell you. It's all I know is that it's that thing, I think it's like a pitcher throws a no hitter. Maybe he's got one pitch that he wished he changed. It's like, it's just a strange, you know, instinct I think we have is, how could I have done that a little better? How could I have said that better? How could I have leaned into this joke or done this a little bit differently? Or why didn't I, in that meeting, why didn't I just say the idea instead of, dance around it? Why didn't I just go for it and pitch it in that moment that happened? I think sometimes we just second guess. It's nature, right? It's that thing. And a lot of people are just uber confident, and they just do it. They don't apologize. They don't think about it. They just move past it. And I'm getting better at doing that. I'm getting a lot better at not, you know, this was a long time ago that I was doing what I was talking about, when in the stand-up days, but I'm getting a lot better at letting things go, certainly that I can't control. But what I try to do now is, whether it's a project or a pitch, or, rallying the troops and working on a thing together, a collaboration, as I just try to do everything I can control. I try to take it in and really learn a lot about it beforehand. I just attack it in preparation. And then when we're in the heat of battle, if we're on a shoot or we're, working with a new client, I'm in the moment. That way, all the preparation has led to that moment, and I just try to trust. And then what happens, happens, right?
Humans do their best work in the moment. You do incredible work with that attack mindset, and that leads to what we see, the zeal and the zest that you have out there on these shoots, and the incredible work that you're doing now and have done. And as we wrap up this conversation, Fran, I am so grateful for your vulnerability and really digging deep and really giving us a thorough, beautiful introspection of your life, your childhood, and everything, connecting all the Legos, if you will, that has made you you. And this was so enjoyable. Thank you so much for doing this.
My pleasure, Brian. Thank you, man.